let's spend some time with the presentation, and then we'll switch to the labs. So first topic, single sign-on. So when talking about single sign-on, we know that it's not an easy task. Okay, so we will have a lot of different challenges to achieve single sign-on from the client perspective. So the user has one attempt to log on. Okay, so logs on to the application once and actually achieve the access to all of the applications behind something, right? Or at once to all of the application, the access is granted. So sometimes we will have to integrate a lot of different solutions together. And of course, when we have different applications to which we get access on different web servers, we would somehow have to integrate those services as well to work together. That if the session is open to first service, the session needs to be maintained when establishing the connection to the second and third and whatever service, right? So this is something that can be achieved with using F5's APM, and this can be dramatically simplified. Okay, so when having access policy manager, we can use different types of protocols on the client side and on the server side. As you can see, we can achieve for different client authentication, we can have different single sign-on methods on the server side, or even we can authenticate the user once and give the access for that user for many of the applications that are behind our APM policy or our virtual servers, because it doesn't mean that it has to be one virtual server. This can be plenty of the virtual servers for which we have policy or the same policy, for example, applied. So it dramatically reduces the complexity of our environment from the user perspective. So the user logs in once, maybe they can use multi-factor authentication for that login process to be more secure, but we give those users access automatically to all the applications that he or she needs uh, for their work, right? To gain access to some Salesforce applications and so on, so to some internal or external applications. So single sign-on APM can be done in a few different ways. And I will show you actually just a short example how it can look like with some forms or one of our applications that we will use in our example. So the mechanisms that can be used in that case could be NTLM, basic authentication, some forms. That can be Kerberos authentication, right? Or SAML, which we are going to cover in just a second. So many different options here. So when we create this single sign-on configuration, we need some more objects, of course. So we will create this SSO configuration like here. So now let me try to, I will show you that in just a second. So when we create the single sign-on configuration, we can add that single sign-on configuration to our profile. Actually, we are under profile configuration here, second tab, which is SSO. And then we select something that we created already, and then put something for to our policy for mapping some credentials here. Okay, I will show you this in just a second. And because we are authenticating the user to many services, so if someone has stolen credentials for one service, automatically gets access to all of them. So we would need to authenticate that user with some multi-factor. So of course, F5, as mentioned previously, can integrate with many, many different services that that are actually available worldwide. Like, I don't know, some duo security from Cisco, like I don't know, SMS authentication or whatever it is. You can select anything you want. So that will be the configuration for single sign-on. So how this can be achieved? Let me try to show you the interface. What are the options? What are the options? So single sign-on configuration, as I mentioned, few different options here. What I configured for my simple application here is a form-based authentication. So normally, without this configuration, I would have to log on twice. So first, I would need to log on to my Access Policy Manager, and then I would need to log on to my backend application. So I don't want to log on twice as a user, right? So I'm configuring the process of logging into the application behind BigIP, and the APM actually takes this process and logs on instead of me having to do that myself. Okay, so it's being done automatically. So without this single sign-on configuration, it would look like this. So let me try to disable that for now because I already configured it. So let me try to disable that for now and apply the policy just like we did for other configurations. And I will try to kill the session for that particular user. Probably, yeah. Anyway, it's a new session as well. Anyway, so let's try to log on as someone. This will be the sales user, and the password will be secret. Okay, I will explain what is that, okay, in just a second. But when I continue, there's no single sign-on. So I will have to log on to the application with, in this case, different username, different password, because my application is not, in this case, synchronized with user database from Active Directory. That's why I have to do a little bit more than only standard configuration. But I will explain that in the policy in just a second. Okay. So I logged out. So if I don't want to log on twice, I have to modify that configuration. So I have to re-enable that single sign-on configuration. So that's the forms single sign-on configuration. This can be Carreras. This can be some kind of OAuth bearer. This can be, I don't know, NTLM or whatever, right? Depending on the application, on the backend application that they have. Okay, so I enable that, but that's not everything. Within the application itself, within the policy itself, I have to map some credentials. And so my big IP knows that what kind of names, username and password it needs to use to put that information into my backend application. So usually I will take the information from the logon page. Okay, so the username and password that the user puts into this application. Actually, not usually, almost always. Okay, so I'm mapping those credentials to specific session variables here for my policy. In this case, I'm doing some trick because my backend application does not use credentials from the user in Active Directory. Okay, so in this case, what I'm going to do is to modify those variables. So I'm using, instead of username, I will use the user hacker, and instead of password, I will use hacku. So it means I'm modifying actually the session variables. Okay, and those session variables will be displayed here, as you can see. Okay, so original values here, and the values that I'm using for my single sign-on are here. So this is my little trick. And then, of course, in advanced resource design, I have a pool of my application, one resource here. So in this case, what I want to achieve after I try to log onto my application, just a second, probably I will have to kill the session here or apply that. Yeah, install that policy, kill that session. And right now, APM should log me automatically into the application. So after I put this sales user and authenticate through through Active Directory, we'll put password here, login. Okay, access was denied. What was happened? Sales user password. I was testing it 5 minutes ago. Yeah, so that was the original values that actually should be sent to the application, but I modified them into this hacker hack you. So when I click continue, I automatically have logged into the application. So when I log out of the application, one more thing I have to do to automatically log out from APM itself is this. So when I go to profiles, I will have to show my APM that if I will see the logout URL here, it must end the session of the application, and at the same time, the session for APM should be closed, should be finished. So when I click logout, well, that should be again disabled. Probably I disabled that or did something wrong. So again, after logging out, of course, yeah, sorry for that. After first click, that should be something that has happened. So I should be logged out from APM session as well, just like here. So that's the goal of single sign-on. According to other options that we want to use to simplify access for specific users is federation, right? So federation, I mean, sorry, I will skip that. So federation, I mean using protocols like SAML and OAuth. I'm sure you have seen plenty of times a situation where you're trying to log on to the specific application, but from different service, like login with Facebook, login with Google, login with Microsoft, or whatever it is, right? So you can use different account on different service to authorize the access to specific application. And protocols that are used there are SAML or OAuth with OpenID very often. Here, let's talk about SAML a little bit. This is a security assertion markup language that can be used to federate the identity. So it means that, let's skip that here. So it means that I will have something called identity provider. So it means here I will have the database for my users, right? So identities and service provider. So web application, which needs to actually be accessed by the user and somehow authenticated or authorized. So I'm the user, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go to the service, and this service will redirect me to authorize or authenticate in this case. So I'm authenticating on this service, and then I'm redirected back to my application with some information about about me, okay? So I'm bringing the information that I'm the user that should be authorized to those resources, okay? So this is how, more or less, very shortly, SAML or actually OAuth protocols can work. So this service does not need to store the database for those users. I can use those identity information from other trusted party. And for example, F5 as a big IP and with APM module can be both in this case. So we can be service provider or identity provider when we try to integrate with some options, with some services. Okay, sorry for that. We need to skip to the last part, which you're going to do during the labs. If you will have more questions related to the single sign-on or identity federation, just let me know. Let me know in the chat or let me know here through the microphone. And then I will describe both protocols with more details. But for now, the last lab that you're going to have is to test how actually F5 can be used to verify some information about the client workstation, client system. Okay, so this is called client and server-side checks. So what I can use, even in this policy, as you can see here, so what I can use, I can try to use both of this, okay? Endpoint security server side and endpoint security client side. When we talk about endpoint security server side, it means that we are using all the verification possible based on the traffic that is passing through the APM, okay? When we talk about the client side verification, we would need to install some agents on the client side. And then this agent is responsible to give me the information, more information about the client. If antivirus is installed, if firewall is installed and running, and with what is the version of the firewall, for example, if there are some Linux files on this system, and so on and so on. So for example, I can use this firewall, and if it's running on my client here, then probably I will get access to my application. If not, I can actually do something about that. I don't need necessarily to drop that connection, but maybe I can give less resources to that particular user. So let's try to this firewall. I have never been testing that here in this environment. So that's the first time I'm doing this here because the lab is a little bit different. So any platform, any vendor, any product ID, of course, I can select the platform and I can select specific firewall vendor. Okay. But I will do anything and the state should be enabled. I hope this firewall will be enabled on my Windows. And then I can save it. So before I will present the logon page to the client, to the user, I want to verify if the firewall is actually enabled and is running on my Windows workstation. So after I install my policy, let me try to kill the existing one. Okay, none. So in this case, when I try to reach this application, okay, new session. Yep. I need to have this agent installed on my system. Okay, so I will try to install this. You can install that together with the client, the VPN client, for example. This is just a component, operating system component, so it's not a huge client, and it does this component doesn't take much resources here, but we absolutely need that to verify something on the workstation. So let's try to install that. Yeah, trusted sites, and so on and so on. Okay, so after I try to access this, take a look, checking for security software. So it verifies with this agent if my firewall is running or not. It can take a while. Hopefully, it will finish pretty soon. Okay. So yes, my firewall is okay. So it's enabled. We can check it on my Windows, right? So when I verify that, firewall, check firewall status. So let's go there. I'm improvising a little bit here, so yeah, so it's enabled. That's why I was passed through this firewall check. But if I disable that, hopefully nothing wrong happen. Now when I kill my policy, or kill my session, let's try to do that. When I try once again, I should be blocked. Okay, I can trust it, of course. This should work. Waiting for endpoint inspection status, checking for security software. I hope that, yeah, it was enough to disable that. So as you can see, access was denied because I don't have firewall enabled. And you can do a lot of different things about that, right? This is just a firewall, but this could be verification of the antivirus. If the hard disk is encrypted, any files existing on your desktop, maybe Windows registry entry, specific entry, if you know that you have some standard configuration for all your computers across the network for your users, you can verify absolutely or almost everything here. So that's it, according to my presentation.